Hey everybody. We're starting off the Evolution to AGI panel talk. Let me introduce you to Saneel from Ritual. Hey Saneel. Mathieu from Linera as well, and Alex from Nillion. Welcome guys. Settle in. So the first question that we want to begin, maybe just quickly introduce yourselves in just like a sentence or two. What do you do? What do you present? And we can move on.
Sure. So my name is Alex Page. I'm the CEO of Nillion. And at Nillion, we are building the blind computer. And essentially what that means is we're building a computation network made up of nodes that allow for a user developer to put data into a network and have that computation run in the blind where the nodes don't actually see the computation that they're doing or the data that went into it, and then outputting data to an individual that you designate or into an application or to you as an individual. And we're accomplishing that by taking cryptographic primitives like FHE, MPC, LSSS, and applying security to the data itself before putting it into the network where the nodes run not seeing that data and then create an output. So it's a very secure way to process highly sensitive information that maybe you don't want to contribute to, say, an AI model, which we'll be talking about here, but there are a lot of different applications for being able to use a blind computer as part of how you create applications that use highly sensitive data without violating the security or giving that data away to somebody else.
Mathieu?
All right, can you hear me? Yes. Awesome. So yeah, so I'm founder at Linera. Linera is a new kind of decentralized infrastructure that we're building that is super exciting. We are really taking the problem of building an execution layer and optimizing it for low latency, especially so low latency transactions, but more importantly, low latency reads. So we really want the user to be able to interact with the blockchain, several users, interacting with the blockchain and really seeing the result of their actions in real time. So that's obviously super important for on-chain games. When you play a move, you want the result of the move to be visible immediately to the other users. But beyond on-chain games, it's a super important primitive, we think, for any kind of multi-chain decentralized finance. You really want to be able to interact with different chains, different auction systems, different primitives, in real time, and so that's what Linera is building it for. And once again, so it's a new kind of decentralized infrastructure. You can see that as a not really competing with existing layer ones and layer twos because our programming model is different. It's based on something we call microchains. So it's a new concept where you give users their own chain of blocks. So giving them the ability to create to put their transactions in real time in new blocks, and send messages to the other users that will be notified immediately, and then wallets are able to immediately process the new data and refresh the UI. So once again, so it's a new decentralized infrastructure for reactive Web3 programming for real-time user transactions. And then there's a kick to it, which is that we do AI inference on the edge, and that's the reason I'm here, I guess. We leverage the infrastructure and able to push AI models and run them in the client, which is super interesting for privacy. And yeah, if you want to run a model in a trusted environment in a way that is reproducible and future-proof, we can do that.
Perfect. Saneel?
Hi guys, I'm Saneel. I'm a founding member over at Ritual. Ritual is building basically the best and most performant infrastructure for people to write smart contracts over models. So the best way I can explain this is, Ethereum was a very 0-to-1 innovation in that you had this globally shared world computer, right? Where people could go and interact, they could write applications, that could then interact with others. It was essentially a big open backend. And that was fine because you had one computer, one state machine that everyone would go and access. But with models, it's a little bit more complicated because you have a bunch of different types of models that may be used for a bunch of different types of use cases. And you also want to be able to have general purpose scripting over that. So where Ritual's tending and sort of what we're going into now is our phase 2, which is the Ritual chain, which basically is a EVM compatible chain that's fully EVM compatible, that extends functionality specifically around AI operations. So we use things like pre-compile and state for pre-compiles to add the ability to natively access models on the chain. So something like an inference request could be one line of smart contract code, and anytime that's pinged or anytime that function's pinged, that inference request is actually atomically a transaction, and then all of the resulting dependencies that come from that output are also generated as transactions. So you could do things like write contracts that chain calls to different sort of models on the chain, and the last little piece of that is we're building a lot of infrastructure around ensuring that a lot of the really interesting work that's been done around cryptographic or game theoretic primitives for giving certain properties to models, like privacy or computational integrity, can be folded into chains. We also do a lot of really interesting work around how do proofs become available on the chain. So I know that when someone runs a model on this chain, whether it's ZK, whether it's T with attestations, that model was run correctly or that data wasn't tampered with. And so with this, we're really hoping to basically open up an entirely new design space of both existing applications that are empowered by models and have models injected to them, and also building protocols around around different parts of the AI supply chain, right? So things like incentivized RLHF or creating creating model ownership schemes, things like that.
Hi, my name is Greg. I'm the founder for Akash Network and the CEO for Overclock Labs. And Akash is the world's first open source supercloud, decentralized and permissionless. And it is probably the best place to get high density GPUs, A100s and H100s on demand, which is very hard to come by. I don't know what the question is, but happy to answer.
The question was just a quick introduction. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah. And to swing this back into AGI, which is actually the topic of today's panel, it's a bit of a jokey question, but what is your sentiment towards Altman? And do you believe that he's actually pushing us towards, a destruction of the world? How are you positive to what he's doing or negative?
Is Sam Altman pushing us through destruction to the world?
Yes. How safely is he looking at his
I think
work?
he's just there to make money. I know this for sure because we do a lot of policy work in DC, and every time I go there, Sam Altman and the gang is trying to shut down open source and decentralized AI actively through lobbying. And they're trying to pass laws in the US to make open source AI illegal because they want to keep AI to themselves. I think there is a lot of self-preservation, self-interest in what they're doing. Not only from a technological standpoint, but from also a policy standpoint. And they're winning in EU, they did win. And we are fighting very hard so that open source and decentralized AI is going to win in US. But there's good news, and most of the legislators and the staffers we speak to, all of them agree that AI being open and decentralized is better for America and the rest of the world. And unless there is concrete damage that's going to happen, they're not going to write rules. And big threat is China stealing AI or bad people with AI doing bad things. But the same argument about guns, right? So anyway, yeah.
Alex, what's your view?
He's not actively destroying. He's
Alex, sorry.
Sorry. Okay. You want my view on Sam Altman? I don't think that Sam Altman's intention is to destroy the world, but I do think that where we exist right now with any nascent technology is that we have a period where we're going through essentially an arms race in AI, right? When ChatGPT 3 came out, we basically altered the landscape for AI technologies and consumer access to that AI tech, but then also the monetization of AI tech, right? They disrupted what the major incumbents in the space were doing when they launched ChatGPT 3, and all of these big tech companies that had been developing in the space for a long time, had been building models at DeepMind or in Google AI, suddenly had to play catch up. And what that created is more or less an arms race on AI capabilities. That's why we see bigger and bigger models coming. That's why things like privacy have been on the wayside until Apple's announcement came out. We're focused right now, Sam Altman and everybody who is really in the AI space is focused towards how can we have the best models possible, and we'll think about the repercussions of creating the best model possible after we've achieved it, because from a monetization standpoint, we need to get to having the best model, be the dominant player in the space before we can start thinking about what outcomes we've created from that.
Mathieu?
Yeah, well, so first, yeah, so we're not there yet, so we got a little bit of time to think. AGI is not going to be achieved with the current models. That's what the specialists are saying. And I'm going to repair this real quick. All right, here we go. Sorry, OCDs. And so what I was gonna say, yeah, but it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of problems to be fixed. Even if we are not at the AGI level yet, the LLMs, the generative models are already some of them have like superhuman capabilities already, like generating definitely competing with professionals to create videos and making all kinds of fake content super cheap, so they can definitely be abused. And then of course there's one of the problems with AI in general is the centralization that it creates in the economy, where who controls the data is going to be able to create train the best models. And so that's really, I think that's the reason we're here, is that also in the blockchain industry we're looking at this and we're thinking, well, we know how to help. We're supposed to be good at creating incentives and creating a community and decentralized applications that can really give the data ownership back to the people and by extension and control over the AI models. So exciting time to be building in the field of blockchain plus AI. I think as a blockchain infrastructure provider, I feel like it's our responsibility to build very strong infrastructure to support that vision. In particular, making consumer apps actually usable in Web3, so that people do use them, and then the data that are generated actually are worth something. Yeah, happy to talk more about this.
Saneel?
On the topic of Sam Altman, I don't think my opinion significantly diverges from from what was previously said. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, he's like a capitalist, right? Anyone's behavior is a function of their incentives. His incentives is to become as rich as humanly possible, and like the quickest path for them is to make sure that whatever models OpenAI develops are the most used models, and then by extension, the most powerful models in the world, right? But I do think one thing that I really disagree with, and Greg actually touched upon this, is like this whole rhetoric that him and his investors, Founders Fund, have been pushing around, like, you know, this idea that open source AI is like really, really fundamentally bad because China or some other adversity or some other adversary will use that basically as a way to reach parity with the US. I remember having this convo, I think 2 months ago, with an unnamed partner at Sequoia China, and I asked them if what was the current state of models within China's borders, since they were so GPU constrained, and if they had backed companies that were building applications that were wrappers around models. And he was like, yes, current state of models is they haven't really hit parity with GPT 3.5. I think that's changed since then because they were constrained by supply, but we did have wrapper companies that were venture backed and were growing. And I'm like, okay, so if the models aren't great, like how are you having these venture scale companies? And they were all proxying to OpenAI's API. So I think that the hypocrisy of Sam Altman trying to go and push this narrative is crazy. So that part I absolutely do not condone.
My next question is going to be, since we're all in Web3, in the intersection between Web3 on its road to AGI, is there anything Web3 can add in the pursuit of AGI? And starting with you, Greg.
Well, so if you peel the layers for AI, right, it begins with compute, right? So access to compute is fundamental. I mean, the spice must flow, right? So, and above that is the models and the full stack goes on. So can Web3 get to AGI? I mean, I think Web3, we have an incredible opportunity to make resources that are previously unable to see a public market available, like Web3 through incentivization and through, Web3 or crypto can go places where traditional software cannot, or closed source software cannot, right? So in that sense, how do we contribute? I think this is quite a significant contribution we can make from a computation standpoint. Is a technology there that can leverage these distributed clusters? Not there yet, but it's rapidly coming, right? So we saw promising work by Google DeepMind, the paper called Dialog Code. They proposed that, hey, you can do heterogeneous training, this federated training happens. A lot of work happening where you can leverage GPUs that are globally distributed and optimized for latency, right? So when we crack that, I think we can crack AGI much sooner, but it really depends, is my answer. Does it need a token? I don't think so, not yet. I think that's maybe. I mean, BitTensor is doing interesting work with tokenization. Like BitTensor emissions are like billions of dollars per year, right? So that incentives are going to yeah, amazing folks that are doing open source AI and giving them a monetization mechanism. We see teams like Noose Research and a whole lot of teams that are working on amazing. Even Noose is actually working on decentralized trading as well. So there's a lot of work happening that is too much to sort of like pinpoint and exactly say this is going to be the contributor, but with the amount of work that's happening, it seems very promising.
Alex?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and then add that this is one of the areas where crypto really controls its own destiny. You know, the recognition by this industry of AI being a huge potential area where we can be building towards decentralization, open source. We can be building mechanisms to incentivize people to contribute models and be able to monetize or bring together infrastructure and incentivize these collective pools of GPUs for AI. These are great use cases that we as an industry recognized early on, and our ability to participate in the revolution that is coming from AI will come around our industry's ability to continue to innovate on how we can build solutions for what we need in the future of, say, AGI or AI bots. Like, this is something that is completely within our control. As long as we're building solutions, then we can contribute and be a part of the evolution to AGI. One of the areas we talk about a lot here about infrastructure as being a big problem that we're solving, but on the last panel I remember that David mentioned around data and ownership of data. This is also going to be a massive issue that comes up in AI, not just on the creation of data and it's out in the world and how do you own it and monetize it properly, but also what are we doing with all of the sensitive data that we're going to contribute to AI. All of us in here, you know, they talked about use cases and consumer use cases on the last panel. Well, the big one for me is, how can AI augment my ability to be more productive, to make decisions, to how can it contribute to my life in a way that augments my ability to get things done? And that's going to require a huge amount of sensitive information from a lot of different sources. So with what we're building at Nillion specifically, using Web3 and using decentralization as a foundation to provide security for the data itself, we can contribute that into these AI models without giving it all to OpenAI, who is clearly in the panel of doing everything closed source, right? They want to control everything. So how do we build solutions that in the decentralized world that solve for things like the sensitive data that you own being able to be contributed to a model that helps you in your daily life?
Mathieu?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, I think blockchain can really help AI in general. So first by creating layers of incentives that help people get together. And for that, they need, so not only incentives, but also need a very secure, secure software they can trust with their data. So if you're gonna run a machine learning model to on your private data, if you encrypt your data, you wanna know that that's really happening, that you can trust the software. It's run, it's been created by the community and his work is intended. The other thing blockchain can do is also just create better use cases for AI model, like AI. So autonomous agent, I think is very interesting. It's something that that the blockchain industry is looking into, is like having transparent bots that can run in a trusted way and can receive data that are also like trusted from, because they've been secured by the blockchain. I think it's very interesting. So in general, I'm biased because I'm a security engineer. I think blockchain is all about security. That's how you give power to the people, is by giving them very secure, very powerful tools. If you give them something that is actually kind of not very secure, they might just choose to trust a centralized hardware provider that makes phones. So I think that if you want to make AI really belong to everybody, you need these powerful tools, you need this very strong infrastructure, and then people they might in fact choose that to manage their data and create new powerful models.
Saneel?
I think I broadly agree with everything that was covered. Mainly, like, if you go look across sectors, forget AI for a second. If you go look at what crypto is like good at across sectors, we figured out really good ways, maybe to the point of too much, of how to leverage incentives to bootstrap network effects, right, and aggregate other resources. That's absolutely important in AI. I mean, I don't have to tell Greg. He obviously does this with GPUs. You know, data is going to be like another important one that was mentioned, right? So that's one that's obvious. I think two is that any sort of guaranteeing a property around privacy or integrity and any sort of associated proof or communication overhead, it makes sense that you want that to either happen in a trustless setting or settle to a trustless layer, right? Like a proof is useless if the arbitrator of the proof cannot be trusted or can be bribed, right? Blockchains are good places to settle that. And I think those two are ones that are both valid and very well discussed. But I think maybe on the lens of AGI, the far more interesting thing to me, maybe going off the beaten path, is how do we like strictly define AGI? I don't think that's something that we strictly defined as an industry as a whole, right? In my opinion, I don't think AGI will be one model that's good at everything. I think we've seen increasingly at the bounds of model development that specialized models do perform better over domains, shockingly, and that there is still some bias variance trade-off even for really powerful architectures like LLMs. And so if you assume that, then AGI looks a lot closer to a swarm of models of which some are really good at certain things, and there's other models that are really good at coordinating and deciding which to switch between them, right? And in a world like that, you basically need, I think, some sort of permissionless layer in which those models can go coordinate, right? Because you can't assume that entire swarm of model, you can't assume that the same company that's building a good model for coordination is the same company that builds like a really good model for like healthcare, right? Or finance or something like that, right? And so the question then becomes like, how do you get models that are really, really well adapted to specific domains to actually coordinate, to actually work with each other on some sort of mutual substrata that cannot be tampered with or cannot be controlled by an adversary, or the messages that are passed over it cannot be messed with. And overwhelmingly, like that actually does just look like a blockchain, right? Because you inherit the inherent censorship resistance and trust guarantees of the underlying chain. So for me, I think there's a lot of really interesting architecture you can build around, like for example, using smart contracts to coordinate economic behavior between different models. And when you have that system, that looks a lot closer to what I define as AGI.
So assuming we actually have different versions of AGI, there's not a single, like whatever AGI ends up being, the way you define it and you see it, and the versions that you would like to see existing in the near future, how do you see each of your technologies actually affecting that versions of AGI? Maybe start with you, Greg, yeah. Oh, turn around from Saneel, yeah.
Sure. Well, I just gave you my definition of what I think AGI is, and I explained, I think, what Ritual does earlier, right, which is provide a way to natively access models via smart contracts. So suddenly building interactions between models becomes a matter of writing very, very simple smart contracts, right? Being able to say like, hey, I want to call to this model, this is one line of the code. I want to be able to call to this model, this is another line, and then there's some logic check, right? There's actually no good way to like currently go and aggregate over a bunch of different models, mainly because there's also not really good incentive structures, I would say, in place to encourage a diversity of models. The biggest thing around like open source AI is that there's really no good monetization paths, because someone has to go host it somewhere if you're not hosting on Hugging Face and monetize it usually via an application. One really interesting thing we do at Ritual is that if you go and run a model on the network and people actually have utility and use this model, right, there are some notion of flow or rewards that you get for running that model, right? So for us, like when we think about how we can accelerate AGI, it's like one is like create a good system where people are incentivized to put on a diversity of models, and then create a really easy coordination layer where people can like programmatically decide how those models interact to each other, and then hopefully from there you'll get sort of exponential increases in capabilities because you'll be able to access these swarms.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So at Linera, the two things that I think we're doing that are going to be very helpful for powerful AI models is so first thing is AGI. So we are allowing users, because our web client has a VM and has all kind of really cool capabilities. One of them being one of them is that we can push code to the client securely through the blockchain. That code could, in particular, be the description of machine learning models that are going to be able to be run on the edge. And so that's very interesting for users if they want to use trusted models privately on data that are a bit sensitive. They can do that through, so we can push sensitive codes to them and really ensure that what they run is what has been audited by the community. So that's one thing, AGI. And the other thing is real-time data feed. So we can, through Linera, we're really good at low latency in general. And so if you're running AI models, maybe for something related to finance, chances are that you actually care a lot about latency of your data. and so we can help you ingest data streams, interact with other AI models, other AI agents at super low latency, yet with everything secured on chain.
Alex?
So Saneel touched on it perfectly when he talked about how the evolution of AGI is going to include these highly specialized models that are focused in specific areas. And specifically, he mentioned healthcare, right? Healthcare model that is built, let's say, in an open source context where you're on Ritual's chain and you can interact with these models. This is exactly how I also see AI evolving. We're going to have these specialized models that are very good at particular things. But taking healthcare as an example, great, somebody has built this amazing model they want to be incentivized off of that runs, say, healthcare diagnostics or runs on healthcare information. The question then becomes, how much of your information and your health data are you giving to this AI model that somebody else controls? This is where Nillion and what we're building with the blind computer fits into this AI narrative. How are we securing the data that we're then passing along to that model so that you can get the results that you're looking for? Let's say it's some sort of diagnostics or what have you, or test results, and you're getting that useful information back, but now because you use cryptography to secure the data itself before it went to the model, you can still keep that data useful while it's secured, and the person that owns the model can't see your private data when you are using their application. So I think that's where we really fit in, is around these cases where you're taking highly sensitive information for you, whether it's healthcare data or maybe you're trading secret sauce, and you want to interact with these highly specialized AI algorithms, but you don't want to give up everything about you or the information or that sensitive data about you to somebody else out in the blockchain ether.
Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the small models taking over because we see the data in Akash as well, I mean, that people tell us, right? So, and also have you noticed, like, ChatGPT forgot how to code? I mean, ChatGPT cannot code anymore. It used to be good at it, but it cannot. So that tells us the more, it's not really how big a model gets that can evolve to AGI. I think it's going to be like the smaller models that are way better at coding or performing like individual tasks and some degree of multimodality. Or I don't know if it's going to be transformers that are going to get us. There's diffusion. There's quite a lot of work happening in like merging these two like mechanisms. So I'm not an AI expert. I mean, I have formal training, but I don't want to say something stupid that'll get me in trouble. But I think it's going to be, I agree. I think it's going to be a lot of like small models coming together, at least from what we are seeing. It could be different, tomorrow because things are evolving so rapidly. But ChatGPT O seems to be pretty promising. I think it's 4.0. It seems to be promising. Not good at particularly one thing, but generally speaking, it's good at overall things, right? So it's hard to say.
And finally, just to round things off, with just a real quick question: do you think, all of you, that we're going to see AGI soon? And if so, in what is the time frame?
8 years.
8 years. We heard 6 in the previous panel, so I'm just curious.
Incredibly specific. I'd love to know. I think that we are in the evolution, the exponential evolution part of the curve. So it's hard for human beings to wrap their minds around something that increases exponentially. So it's hard for me to even fathom a guess of when we would get to AGI. But I think that the disruption that we'll see in the industry from evolution of AGI is coming in, say, the next year and a half. From there, we're going to start to see real changes in how things are done because of the evolutions in AI. But when we actually get to AGI, it'd just be a guess.
Mathieu?
All right, yeah, so AI models that don't hallucinate and are better than humans, 10 years.
Saneel?
Yeah, I still have no idea how we're defining AGI, but I like Mathieu's definition of AI models that don't hallucinate and can perform better at humans than most tasks. Probably half a decade.
Thank you all. This marks the end of the panel. A quick applause, please, for Saneel, Mathieu, Alex, and Greg. Thank you all.